to Cassette Connection, the podcast where we discuss music and meaning with the people who make it. My name is Ben, and with me is Alex.
This episode, Ben speaks to the rock and roll band Helena Pop. Based in Canberra, Helena Pop are a five-piece band that have been writing, touring, and performing music for a number of years and have recently released a single titled Oh What a Shame.
We talk about how the band was formed and how all the members joined and fit within the group. We talk about how the group's sonic direction has changed over time, moving from singer-songwriter folk to eclectic pop that draws from a broad range of sound. We discuss the way Jack writes music and brings it to the band for it to be formed into a final piece. Helena Pop also tells us about the ideas and concepts behind the way they perform. Enjoy.
Hi, my name's Jack. I'm the singer-songwriter of the band.
My name is Dan, and I play keyboard in the band.
I'm Hayden, and I play the drums in the band Helena Pop.
I'm Kathy, and I play guitar.
Hi, I'm Ben, and I play the bass in the rock and roll band Helena Pop.
The colour's unreal, I know that waddle. Yellow slushed against tar black's eggshell. Head hung low, miles from your car to my home. Nothing sticks in my head, not the cadence, the resonance, the latent vibrations, and maybe a handful of words that were said. But I don't think it's worth repeating that. Just let some things die in the air.
So the time we formed the band was on the, I believe it was the 12th of December. I'd organised a show at a venue called Magpies City Underground. It was at a Magpies RSL club. And on the lineup, I had put, who was on the lineup now? I think, was it
Duck Duck Ghost?
Duck Duck Ghost, yeah. Bucket Owl. Who else was on the lineup then?
Was it Fricka? Wait, why was I there? Was it Beneath Bonetta?
I believe
it wasn't.
Were you playing the last set?
Yeah, that might have been that show. Yeah, that was my first solo show.
Aww.
Yeah. And Ben, right before I played, I was opening. At the time, I was just doing the acoustic guitar, singer-songwriter thing. I right before I got up on stage, Ben asked if they could sit next to me on stage, similar to what a friend of ours had done to another band. Of course, I agreed because I thought it was very funny. And after I finished playing, a friend of ours, Hetty, and Ben sat me down on a table and asked if I wanted to be in a band with them. It was a pretty easy decision. I think I was really desperate to be in a band, and I liked these two and respected them both as musicians. Yeah. And then I believe Hayden was asked maybe a week or two later after that. And in that meantime, I went around to Ben's house a few times, and we'd practiced a few songs. I think I still have some of the original recordings from those times. And I remember just getting home and listening to them over and over again because I was so excited to finally be in a band with someone else who, wasn't a dirty punk or something like that.
I'm a bit offended that you've referred to me as not a dirty punk. I'd like you to retract.
Coming to your room, Ben, and it was just it had a bit of clutter, and I was a little bit shocked when I walked in.
That's a very diplomatic way of putting it.
Yeah, and I knew Hayden a little bit. Like at the show, there was this big kerfuffle around one of the bands wanting to use Hayden's drum kit after Hayden had already packed the drum kit up because they'd showed up late for their their set by about half an hour. Poor form.
I've heard this before.
Yeah, so it's a bit obvious who the band is, but I won't say their name. They believe they were on third, but they were actually second, and I'd sent that message very clearly to them. They didn't show up for their set, and so DuckDuckGhost very graciously picked up the slack, and then the other band came in and demanded the drums remain set up after they'd been late to their own show.
They were not aware of my sense of moral superiority and my propensity for passive aggression, so it wasn't the funnest day of their lives, I don't think.
Yeah. And then in terms of like us really forming the band, I think there was this week, I think it was O Week, would have been O Week 2015. We just set ourselves up in one of the practice rooms at the School of Music. And it was basically, like a week of us just practicing all of these songs, some of which were written for Helena Pop that Ben and I had sort of worked on, and others that were like older songs that I'd been playing by myself. Yeah. That's sort of the formation, and I think I'll pass it over to someone else.
I guess I follow on naturally because I went to many of the early Helena Pop shows. Carrie and I, Carrie not in the band, but a real person nevertheless. I think we went to the first like nine shows or something like this before one of us missed one for reasons which I don't remember. And then I believe I've actually never asked this, but I've always thought that the reason that I was asked to be in the band is not because of my musical ability, but because I am the possessor of a wonderful reed organ, which I bought for $70 from the Green Shed. And another night when I know it's probably not the same night, but we were at a show at Magpies in the city, and the Green Shed was still open, so it must have been an early-ish long show. And I bought it, and it didn't have a power plug at the end of it. It was also full of beetles. But after the beetles were vacuumed out of the inside and the power cord was connected, it's still very broken, but also makes a lovely noise, which I credit with placing me in the band.
Yeah, I think that certainly played a role in it.
Oh, good.
I have no memories of this band ever being formed. I mean, I acknowledge that it must have had a beginning, and I have vague recollections of all of these events that you're talking about, and I know they happened, and I know that I was there. But I don't have any understanding of this band actually commencing. I just kind of know that it started at some point, and it's just been happening ever since then. But I can't really remember a time in my life when it didn't happen.
So your existence is entirely predicated on Helena Pop existing.
It feels like all those, when you're talking about how the band formed, they feel like those kind of memories that are your early childhood memories, that you're not really sure whether they actually happened or not, but everyone says they did.
Okay. So you're basically a victim of circumstance in this, Hayden.
I was just going along, minding my own business, and then one day I just got put in this situation, and it's been happening ever since.
For plan B, this was how I was gonna live my life. Everything in the middle, of course. I don't miss staring at a screen, constantly figuring out that I'm worthless. Get angry, sing songs of heartbreak and loss.
Helena Pop never feels like a conscious decision at any point in time.
No, because why would you decide that? Yeah.
Happenstance.
I think Dan entering the band seemed to repeat a pattern which I repeated for both Dan and Kathy, which was very, very late night Facebook messages that I sent that were very non-committal about joining the band.
Okay, I disagree. I don't know what happened to you, Dan. How did you happen?
I got a message at like 3 a.m. saying, "Would you like to play some organ?" And I don't know, but we sent a group message to you. Mine was more like a secret.
Yeah, mine was like I had it coming, for a long time, like many, many months. So Helena Pop at that time, what was Helena Pop, had asked me to do some backing vocals for a song. And I was like, yeah. And then I had been going to so many Helena Pop gigs from playing in another band as well, in A Zim Zane and His Lovely Bones, that they said, oh, do you want to sing the songs that you sang, that you did backing vocals on the launch? And I was like, yeah. And then I just stayed for the rest of the set. I don't really remember either. Does anyone actually else remember this?
Yeah, I distinctly remember. So we did an encore for that, and we played a song of ours called All I've Got as our encore song. And I remember Kathy doing harmonies over the chorus that were unpracticed, like just off the cuff, that were really good. And I remember Kathy turning to me after the show and being like, we should do that again. I'm like, oh, yeah.
But Jack, increasingly I'm feeling like you and Ben have just made the rest of us up. And, well, because Dan doesn't really remember much. Hayden doesn't remember much. I don't remember that. I do remember the launch. But maybe it's just like, it's like a whirlpool of being drawn into the band at some point, I reckon.
Special about these screams, there's a million others pushing their hearts harder than me, and the villagers have all started to speak about how their monster has a narcissistic streak. Wish I was better at self-marketing, and there's a warrior of a little skill or finesse pushing a blade.
So Helena Pop is this kind of entity that Jack and Ben and maybe Hayden created at some point in time. And the rest of you have just kind of entered the orbit of Helena Pop and been sucked in, and now you're a permanent member.
Yeah, but we don't play, like, we don't like doing stuff without any one of us. I think I can say that.
There was a period where whenever we played without one member, we all had to wear pajamas. And then.
Oh my God, is that what the pajamas are about?
Yeah.
It's in the morning.
I never knew.
It represents the nighttime that our souls enter when we're without another person.
Well, it goes, it'll never be the Jack Livingston show. Now I'm feeling pretty fucking low. Skip the credits, turn to page 5. Didn't have a plan B.
How did you decide that this is the final form then? Because, like, yeah, it seems like this has been an ongoing rolling process where you've been doing gigs. I mean, you were writing and recording music without Kathy and Dan for a while there. How did you decide this is Helena Pop's final form?
I think it sort of came about very naturally. Like, I remember this was actually playing a show without Kathy really crystallized this in my mind. And I think this is where I certainly felt very strongly that I didn't want to play without the members of the band, like every member of the band that's in the band. Yeah, and I think that like really cemented in my mind that these people that I'd been doing this thing with, and at that point, I think we'd been doing it for like 6 months to get a solid unit.
You guys played a show when I was in the UK in the middle of 2017, I feel.
Yeah, that was the show.
Yeah, I think pretty sure that I joined the band around like October the previous year. So it had been like maybe like 9 months, 10 months. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think it sort of came clear that we all filled a niche in the band. And I mean, I think as well also, like, I don't know how many more niches there are to fill. Probably another aspect.
And it always ends the same. I don't get the treasure, I don't attain the fame. Oh, what a shame. Oh, what a shame. Oh, what a shame. Oh, what a shame.
Helena Pop formed. So Jack, you were doing the solo stuff. And Ben was in various other bands and so on. How did you go from those past projects and form your way into Helena Pop, and how have you kind of taken from those past projects and lent them to the band as is now?
I don't know about being influenced to do things. I think Helena Pop practices and processes that we do are very influential on other areas of my life personally. Like whenever I am...
I agree.
Yeah, just to flip the old question on its head there, I think whenever I encounter difficulties working with like a different musical project, I think, you know, like a lot of the things that we have tried in Helena Pop, because we're so unsympathetic towards boundaries of any kind, I think is like really helpful. Like, you know, if you're stuck and you can't really get to something that you're trying to get to musically, why don't you just like turn off all the lights? Or why don't you just switch instruments with like another person in the room? Or why don't you just play in a different time signature for a while? Or why don't you just make a bunch of noise? Or why don't you, you know, like, and these are all things that we kind of do on a regular basis, and they really, I guess, help with other areas of my life, I think.
I actually totally have to say that I agree. Like, I know that we all bring previous experience from stuff, but like I think that we're all pretty active musicians anyway. And there's been a bunch of times where I've been like working in other things, whether it's my own Kathy stuff or like the Zim stuff, or like doing some like BVs for someone else or something. And I'm like, oh, well, what would Helena Pop do? Because I think that one of the good things is that, like, because we've been together so long, but what did you say, Hayden? Unsympathetic to boundaries?
Yeah, it's an untested term. I don't know whether that's right.
No, I like it. I'm rolling with it. I'm continuing on. I mean, like, I guess I'd done a lot of, like, maybe I wanted to play guitar. I sort of forced myself. Like, I think Helena Pop initially were like, oh, do you want to do some harmonies? And I was like, nah, I do harmonies with a Zim. I want to play lead guitar with you. So maybe that kind of influenced it. I wanted to do something different that I wasn't already doing. And Helena Pop were like, that's cool, so that's good.
People are talking circles around me. Of course I find it concerning.
Yeah, I think Helena Pop has like a really wonderful way of working, and like it like very much solidifies like the fact that you have to be friends with the people that you're working with, and that you have to get along with them, and like, you know, you have to be able to like laugh and hang out and have a really good time in order to make good music, I think. And that's a really important thing that I've learned from Helena Pop.
Yeah, and I guess this, I think I kind of have a point to tie into Ben's as well with that. Like, I think when we started, and it was just Ben and I, but then as we accrued more people, I think we always tried to make it that we would respect everyone's voices equally. I think sometimes painfully the band is extremely democratic, and that can sometimes mean that things go slowly, but I think it means that we all like feel good about the decisions we make. You know, we respect each other as musicians. You know, I don't presume to know more about drum parts than Hayden might, you know. But in the end, it's also, if I have an idea, my idea is still respected. And I think that's one of my, you know, favorite bits about the band that I think can be applied in, you know, my life otherwise, that it's just that when you're coming together and working with people, like, it can't be the Jack Livingston show, a top-down kind of dictatorial approach. It needs to be, you know, working with everybody.
Yeah, beautiful.
I would argue we're not actually democratic, because if three of us think something and the other two think they disagree, then we're not going to just be like, okay, well, the three think that, so the other two stuff yous. So I reckon it's like, I'm sorry to just like interject with some political thought, but I think it's more consensus-based potentially, or maybe communitarian. I don't really know what that means.
It's yet less.
So you're the UN.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Washes over me.
right, cool. So I guess that what Jack was just talking about rolls on pretty well into talking about the actual writing process itself. And I don't know if Jack wants to start or if whoever wants to start, just to talk about how, I guess, how a song is firstly conceived and then, brought to the band and worked out from there.
So I guess the starting point sometimes varies, but is often a situation where I'll bring something, like a song to the band. It'll have normally most of the words, and it'll have the chords, and I'll have a vocal melody. Although there are certainly times that this hasn't happened. I know the song How to Do a Foley Break and Repair Yourself. Basically, Hayden and I were left in a practice room right after a practice. Everyone had to leave early, but we were just packing up, and I started playing a ridiculous guitar riff, and then Hayden started drumming, and then I just sort of started assembling words from my head. That was how that song came about. But yeah, it tends to be that I bring the parts of the song that I would probably play to the band, and then we start to kind of jam it out and assemble the song that way.
Till I've got nothing left, till I'm run out of breath, fuck you, and fuck to the world I see, fuck you, I wanna be angry and I'll chuck the whole candle in, and I'm judging the first and the burn.
I think the way we write songs together or arrange the songs that Jack has written varies pretty wildly depending on the mood that we're in and the kind of song it is. Like, there are some songs that have been sitting in a Dropbox for 2 or 3 years, but I think we're all quite adamant that they're like quite good, and we'll get to them eventually. And I think a big kind of milestone that sticks out to me was when we were working on a song called That's One Strange Love, which we used to call post-apocalyptic. And I remember we were in a practice one time, and we collectively, or someone individually, was trying to convince Jack not to play guitar in a certain section. And I think that was maybe the first time ever that we had a song where Jack wasn't playing guitar at all times. And I think that the kind of music or the arrangement ideas that came out of that was really powerful, because it just kind of freed us up from, and it didn't just free up Jack from the instrument that Jack was playing, it kind of freed all of us up from what we were doing in any given moment. We had the freedom to not play or to play something that we hadn't kind of anticipated or would not be expected of us. And so I think just that simple idea of having Jack not play guitar for a while kind of snowballed into a lot of the ideas that we had for future songs.
Nice. So, Dan, how about you? What's the kind of jam process like for you in terms of arranging and building keyboard parts?
Yeah, no, I really don't. I don't understand it. It seems to sort of work, but in weird sort of jumps. I don't know. I have a good answer. Sorry, Ben. Yeah, we sort of I don't know. It in pragmatic terms, what sort of happens is that we play the song over and over again, and through various bits of trial and error, my keyboard part becomes louder, if not better, and then eventually it stops changing. So I guess that's how it is.
A very mathematical approach to that. Just keep doing the thing until...
Just do it over and over again until it locks in. Hey, if it works, it works. How about you, Kathy?
I just want to say that I'm really glad that Hayden said that about changing, about Jack not playing guitar for That's One Strange Love, because I couldn't remember when that started, but I think that moment is, definitely feels kind of pivotal to me as well, and not just for Jack, but to really start thinking to ourselves, okay, we always aim for making a good live show, but we don't have to be just working out what to do with ourselves and our given instrument as if our instrument is an attachment of our body. I don't have to actually do something all the time. So I think that whenever that sort of slowly started happening, certainly helped change my composition or like, working out my parts or whatever. I guess I feel a bit the same way as Dan. I usually wait until like Hayden or Ben are sort of like on a track, they're like going along. But there was one song. Oh, it was is it Oh What a Shame that we swapped? So for Oh What a Shame that we just put out, like we were really, really stuck on the song and we jammed it a bunch of times and it was just like not going anywhere. But we all really liked what Jack was bringing. Like we're all really like, no, this song is really good. We think it's really cool. And then that was, I think, maybe the first time that we all swapped instruments. So I think I played keys, Dan played guitar. Pretty sure Ben and Hayden swapped and Jack kept playing his acoustic so that we knew the song. And we all like kind of, I guess, inspired each other's parts is maybe a good way to say it. I think it varies a fair bit.
There's a great big evil waiting inside for the perfect opportune moment to strike. Mess with them and you'll mess with us. There's just a few things that we can't let.
Yeah, I think like we all really like the songs that Jack writes. And when he brings them to us, I think we just want to do like a good job of making them sound like as good as they can, or as good as we can make them sound. And it's just this process of like, I guess, like interpreting what Jack is putting out like through his guitar and lyrics and melodies, and then like trying to figure out, using the skills that we all have, how we can like tell the story of the song and like just make it sound like, make a sound world that fits it and that does justice to Jack's songwriting.
Yeah, nice. I think there's a couple things to kind of go on from there, but I think one of the really interesting things with Helena Pop is, I guess, the development process of the music. And in terms of what you guys kind of post and have recorded and that kind of thing, it seems like the music in terms of the recorded music and then what's kind of nutted out in the jam process or the playing live process, it tends to start in one place and then end up in a recorded place, somewhat completely different. Can you talk about how that process comes about?
I think it starts with this kind of, I think we came to this conclusion, and this was around when we started recording songs like That's One Strange Love, that aiming for like a purely live sound wasn't ever going to serve us well. I think it's really tricky to bottle that lightning. I think you hear it in songs like, especially in the genre of like ska music. Like I don't think there's any, like there's some okay ska songs recorded, but mostly it's not that great. That's my hot take.
I'm so glad ska's made it into this podcast already.
Certainly, like you just can't. It's very difficult to bottle that lightning. And I think that we, being very cynical about it, I just don't think we have quite the resources to be able to do that. And I think we had to really, there was a reckoning, what do we do from this point? Like, how do we deal with the idea that we can't purely replicate our live shows, that we do put a lot of effort into? And I think it was Ben who sort of said it to the band, that we should really try and do things that we can't do live. That's the advantage that we have here in the recorded space. We can try things that really aren't possible for the all of us to do on stage.
I guess like we spent quite a lot of time on like with Punk's Dead and Oh What a Shame and some other stuff that'll come out later. We spent a lot of time doing like pre-production work. So we recorded like pretty extensive demos across like 2 kind of weekend sessions. And where we like did try and kind of hash out all those like all the stuff that we wanted to play around with that we can do in a studio that we can't do live. So that's like a really valuable thing for us, I think, is to have that, like have the ability to play with that in our own time, before we introduce like an engineer or a producer. Like it's great working with those people too, but it's also really nice to be able to do that just with the band.
I mean, I think we're always learning and changing the way that we like to do things. Like when we were asked a question a few seconds ago, no one would step in to answer it. And I mean, my interpretation of that is that we're all too afraid of stopping somebody else from saying something that we would never dare to say anything ourselves. And I think like when we were demoing a song that Jack had written recently called Faith Some More, and we had never been able to like play it together. Like it was a really difficult song for us to figure out. And I think at the end of the session that we had assigned for kind of demoing the last lot of songs that we were going to work on, we had this song left over, Faith Some More, that we all really wanted to do justice, but we just couldn't get to. And so I think we kind of just let Ben do their thing a little bit on that song, and kind of all came back to it after Ben had a chance to see a particular vision through. And so that was a really important learning experience for me, at least, to be like, well, we have to be very, over the top in terms of how much we respect each other and our respective thoughts. But there are certain times when we just have to like give somebody the ball and they have to run with it themselves for a little while.
Jack and I had this conversation where when we were talking about our more recent recordings, Jack was like talking about how different members of the band are like invested in certain songs and different like we sort of kind of organically went to songs that we like, I guess, had a kinship with, or like resonated with us, and like kind of took them over, on like not necessarily took them over, but like kind of I guess like cradled them like they were our children, raised them. Maybe Jack could say some of this a bit better than I have. But yeah, that was just something that kind of reminded me of, that we all like have, like we all do, like we love getting each other's input, but it's also nice that we can kind of like organically select songs and like just raise them, like take kind of executive control over. Please don't include me saying the words executive control in the podcast.
You have a consensus system with optional executive control. Elected on a bipartisan basis every 2 to 3 years.
So that's kind of like a natural process of just like Ben said, like you kind of, I like this song just because it kind of works for me kind of thing, and then you kind of are the person that develops it a bit more, or
yeah. And I guess like when we were doing like mixed notes and stuff, like people had more notes for certain songs and like more like I think that just relates to their like individual visions for those songs.
Did Kathy or Dan want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think like just because we were talking about that live to recorded sound, like transition, although there were some songs that I guess particularly the more we started demoing, maybe started life a bit more in that world. But I feel like maybe in our live set, that kind of like transition and movement between who's sort of like doing what and like really taking the lead on something or a moment is maybe a little bit more linear. Like it's like, Hayden's doing this, and now Ben's got this dramatic, cool, fuzzed out bass bit, and then now Dan's whacking his keyboard with a shoe. And that's really like visual as well in our live show. But I feel like maybe it took us a while to realize that we probably needed to like keep that kind of passing the baton happening, but not in such a linear way for our recording. So like, yeah, I just totally agree with what Ben was saying, basically.
Well, I guess that raises a good point of just like Kathy said there, taking the recorded material that you've worked so hard on recording and then kind of repurposing it for the live performance. How do you kind of rationalize that then?
Yeah, I think this is a question we've been really struggling with. I think Faith Some More is an example, like, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's certainly a song that may be very tricky for us to replicate live. I think in the past we've definitely tried some things like this, like some of the shows that we've played at the Polish club in Turner, because they've got a full stage there and like curtains. We can hide things off stage and run and grab things, and we've sort of tried that. And I think as much as I'm like don't necessarily have the answer to how we're going to do this, I think I'm quite excited to see how we go about it. I think that there's some elements of that purely recorded side that I think will make our live shows like more entertaining to watch, certainly, and then probably sound better is the second thing.
Dan, do you have anything to add to that? Because I feel like keyboards is a big thing, right? Like you could have the entire spectrum of synthesis at your hands in a recording situation, but then it's only just Dan with his keyboard. So like, how do you kind of recreate the sounds if they are there?
Yeah, it's a problem. And also because you become quite attached to them. So you think, here comes the bit where this happens, but it doesn't happen because you're not doing it. And like, I don't know, I think you've got to pick favorites because you've only got two hands and 2 feet, and you only really use 1 foot at a time, or I do anyway. So you're strictly limited. So yeah, there's no art that I've thought of to do it. So I pick my favorite bit, and that's the one that gets played.
I think we've always been quite like malleable in the way that we kind of approach songs and performance. Like we've done a couple of shows where we introduced a string section into the band, which is like an example where like we're quite willing to like augment our sounds in those ways. And like Hayden uses a sample pad, which I think brings a lot of like extra elements. So yeah, I think like in a lot of ways what you're going for in a live show is quite different to what we're going for on a record. And like we are very invested in like the visual kind of performative stuff. Like we wear costumes, and we like to have lighting, and we like to dance around and have a good time. And like the concert is much more of like an experience than it is like an embodied, I guess, experience rather than just an oral one, which I think is a good way to think about it.
Yeah, so you're kind of building the overall experience and placing the songs and how you play them within it.
Yeah, within like a context of being played here and like to these people.
Nice. Kathy, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just that like I think that riffing off what Ben said, like our live shows, we try to make definitely quite an experience that is like something worth being in the room for, and that just very simple thing of being in the room means something. And we try, I think it's true of all of us that we try to feel that way about ourselves. So we're in the room with each other as well as the audience. And that's something that I think this took us ages in a lot of ways to figure out how to not have that when we're in our recordings. So like when we do have that, we've got all this different stuff to play with for, those songs that we're like, might have started off in like as demos or whatever, and less live kind of things. It's like, okay, but we're actually quite familiar with this idea of all these physical bodies in physical space and reacting to each other, and that being really organic and immediate and transient, I guess. Is transient the right word? I don't know.
Going off of what Kathy just said, in terms of kind of thinking about the song in the space and thinking about the kind of temporal aspect of it as well, the kind of transient aspect of it. You guys tend to add a lot of, like Kathy was saying before, a lot of dramatic aspects to playing the music and the shows and everything like that. How do you kind of decide what's going to be this kind of free temporal thing as opposed to what's going to be very linear as written music?
I think sometimes we just do things that are maybe silly or a bit obnoxious even, and then at the end of it, the person who's done it will usually say, okay, well, I mean, I won't do that again. And oftentimes the other four people will say, well, you have to, because that was actually really great. Like, I remember one time, to go back to that song, That's One Strange Love, I remember Dan suggested, because there's a bit at the end of the song where it gets loud and then quiet again. And I remember Dan suggested that we ought to do that 2 times. And I remember, I think the rest of us were like, well, no, that's a terrible idea. That would be a bit too much, Dan. And then we did it 2 times and we decided that it was probably the best thing ever. Anyway, I don't think that answers the question, and I think Ben should probably speak.
I feel like I've been talking a lot already, and I've already been on the podcast talking about the band. So if anyone else would like to, I can't really remember the question as well, but
I guess it's about the kind of like the free aspect of the music that you guys are playing, and the kind of performative aspects. Jack, if you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I think we've had a discussion about this in the band a few times about how like we tend to look at these songs with the themes of the song in mind, and so the free bits I think often sit in points where it sort of makes sense thematically for them to sit, and that's a really big concern that we keep with us. Like, songs have to sort of make sense, the story wise at least. That's the one, I guess, rule that we tend to have pretty strictly is like you're kind of trying to do honor to the song, like you're respecting the song. And there are bits where being silly makes sense in a kind of undercutting the song, but that being an important part of it, with That's One Strange Love, like a kazoo solo in that song is designed to undercut quite serious themes about like nuclear apocalypse and things like that. Yeah, and there's songs, especially in the songs that we've been working on at the moment, that have free sections that act in very particular ways thematically. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that rolls pretty cleanly into my next question, which is about the kind of lyrical content of the songs. And I guess this is a question that goes to Jack in terms of like, there's a lot of the lyrics of Helena Pop songs are very dense, but they're written in a way that is very, very approachable and very concise, but at the same time very poetic. Do you want to talk about your kind of lyric writing process?
Yeah. So I guess for me, what I tend to do, and I come from a school of writing a lot of very rhymey poetry. When I was in high school, I was carrying around a small green pocketbook that I used to write poems in all the time. And I think that informs a lot of my lyric writing. You know, I tend to use a lot of rules that are within kind of pretty old school poetry, you know, around metering and rhyming. Although sometimes I think my accent lets me get away with some rhymes that are perhaps not necessarily so good. But yeah, I think that my approach is that I both want to approach it from a poetic standpoint, but I think it also, you know, needs to be approached from an understanding that when I'm at a live show or I'm listening to a recording, I don't necessarily have the ability to really slowly pick through every line like reading a poem. And a good approach is that, you know, I want words to be immediate in their impact, but also perhaps have some deeper layers to them. So that's the balance that I kind of try to strike with the words that I put in the songs. You know, I think you know, for "Oh What a Shame," which is the most recent single that we released, at the beginning of the song, I start to play around with the ideas of like kind of false memories. And so the way I do that is through the way my brain tends to remember things, which is through colors, spitting out random colors of objects that occurred in this memory, kind of to really highlight, I think, how, you know, I'm telling a really altered version of a story. I think also like it's good to have in mind the character you're writing about. You know, I think sometimes it tends to, especially when songs are written in the first person, seem obvious that the character's you, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that each song has its own character. Even if that character might resemble you in some ways, it's still a fictional version of that. And you need to understand how that character thinks and what happens to that character.
So it's kind of like writing a fictional story in that sense, even if it is kind of semi-autobiographical.
Yeah, because I you know, I'm pretty, like, I don't believe that anyone who's writing this sort of fiction is really writing the truth in some ways. But we're writing a version of a world, you know? And I think sometimes people get a bit confused about that, and they tend to lean really heavily into the idea that the thing I'm writing is real and the character is me. But that can lead to some, I think, some very dodgy scenarios.
Post-apocalyptic night, and I accepted my fate. But as I lie here, nothing has changed. And oh my apathy, it's done nothing. And there goes Anthony Green welcoming the neon.
So having lived with Jack for a bit, we don't live together at the moment, but we have for a bit. I think that Jack's writing process, like maybe something that he omitted, which I think is actually important in a way, and at least seems like this was not a surprise to me, is that he writes very, and Jack, interject if you just like, that's not how I write. But I think that he writes very orally and with the words like in his mouth. And they're not like, I think that one of the reasons which yeah, like is a cool, I think that it really feeds into how your songs come out in the end, because they're often quite rhythmic, and your delivery of every line is super important, I feel, for the meaning, but you're like writing them as you're delivering them a lot of the time. So that kind of like, you know, I think lends them to be naturally very performed things. I mean, obviously they're songs. They're meant to be performed. I don't know.
I think that is my, like, it's the idea that these aren't, you know, these aren't poems in my little green pocketbook. Like, these are designed to be sung and played along to. I think a big part of my writing process is that, like, often the words come first, and those words help inform the way the melody should go or the way the rhythm should go, both in like a direct, like the meter of the words, sense, but also in a kind of thematic sense. Am I singing about a meteorite impact? So how does that inform how this goes? Or am I singing about slow car rides? So how does that go?
I feel like in interpreting Jack's songs, like one of the first things that I look for is like the tone and color of the words that he's using. So if he's making like kind of uncomfortable descriptions, even if I really don't know what's going on in the narrative of the story yet, I'll sort of like cling on to that first.
I feel like whenever I first hear one of Jack's songs, like even if I haven't like read the lyrics or even if I didn't like hear every word, it's very clear like the feeling that comes across. And I think that does relate to what Jack was saying about like how the rhythm of the words and the like meter is affected by the content. But I feel like there's a very the link between what Jack puts into the words and the melody and the guitar parts is always very like clear and fully formed, and gives like, it really tells us everything we need to know about what the song should be when it's brought to us. Like there's a lot of, I guess, information encoded into it that we can then decipher.
I think whenever I hear a song of Jack's for the first time, there's a bit of a honeymoon period where I don't really understand yet what the song is actually about or what it's trying to do. And that's usually a good time to write your part, because I think oftentimes when I've not settled on something to do for the song until after that, and I start to understand more about what is going on with the song, I find myself unable to like react to it in a helpful way, because I feel as though playing music over the top of it would be, like it would be a distraction or it would be detrimental to the song itself. So there's a really important kind of, honeymoon period after I hear the song for the first time where I'm like, well, I'd better bash out the part that I'm going to play before like the song gets set in stone, or otherwise it'll just become all too hard.
Kathy, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Hayden, because like I feel like I'm sorry, Jack, but definitely even if there's some songs that I know basically everything about what they're about, and I don't think like, oh, I'll ruin it. I'm like, I want to act stuff. But I do feel the same way in some sense, in that like, let's say the song Lil Thunder the Wonder Car, like I know now like a fair bit about all of the sort of things that are going on throughout it, but very early on I just kind of got a lot of the like images that are painted, and then I'm just reacting to my like feeling that I'm getting because of those images, as opposed to my interpretation of this like story that I know. And I think because music is so abstract, like sometimes it's best if you just react to like the imagery that's been created by the lyricist, as opposed to like your then like interpretation or your random thoughts about this actual story itself in a way.
I think for with what you were saying just then, Kathy, that you're bringing like yourself into it is a really great way of putting it, and I think that's a really valuable thing that everyone in the band does. It's like, it's not just, I guess how I phrased it, in that we're trying to like interpret Jack's words, but we're also like bringing our own like experiences in, and like it becomes something greater than it was initially because of that.
Yeah, so it's like a collective interpretation of, or your own voice added to the voice of Jack in that situation.
Yeah, I think there's more directions that it could go in from the initial lyrics and melody and chords than one. Like so you're making choices in that respect, I guess. Yeah, that I'm not actually sure that's the answer to the question, but that's what I was just thinking. So yeah.
It's the rise of the reactionary right.
like I said before, some of the lyrics being very direct and semi-clear, it kind of follows that kind of punk aesthetic to me. It seems like, Jack, you're kind of a punk wannabe in a pop band. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think that maybe just comes from like the music that, you know, really made up my development. Primarily, I listened to a lot of country when I was growing up. That was my dad's big music thing. And I think that, like, lyrically speaking, country music and its directness has a lot of similarities to punk music. It doesn't try and obfuscate really what it's about. And there was something that really appealed to me about that. And I think, you know, punk definitely informed a lot of my roots. I was in a punk band before I started doing the singer-songwriter thing. And certainly, like, you know, punk music wasn't something I was completely unfamiliar with growing up, but it certainly really raptured me, I think, at a point. This music that was, like, really honest. So you know, with a bit of backtracking, like, in terms of my influences, like Kimya Dawson played a really big part in my influence as a writer. You know, Kimya Dawson, I believe, self-describes as a punk. And I think that style of punk really, really attracted me. The idea that you could write songs that both fused like a lot of imagery and poetry in them, but also had like a clear story that you were trying to tell.
Yeah, cool. And I guess that goes pretty cleanly into talking about some of the influences that you all bring kind of musically into the band. For me, like, I've never heard a band like Helena Pop, so I couldn't say like clearly where the influence on the music lies. But if you each want to talk about kind of musical influences that impact on your writing within the band, and I think Jack's talked about it there, but if you wanted to talk about it any more, or if anyone else wanted to pick that up.
I think we all, like, and this ties into the respect that we have for each other, like, I think that we really let each other bring our musical influences to really inform how songs go. You know, as I said, I have my influences, which are from things like Johnny Cash, and then later on, like the Mountain Goats and Kimya Dawson and those kind of styles of writing. But certainly, like, each of us have our different things, you know.
I don't know about influences. I have lots, but I don't know if any of them are particularly helpful to talk about. I like sometimes how we have, for certain songs, like, hyper fixated on certain, like, particular influences to, like, for a certain reason. Like, there's a very particular Neutral Milk Hotel guitar tone that is like something that we often go towards because it feels like, you know, if we have that, then that's like a really strong anchor to like a kind of shared understanding of music that I think we all have. So it might not be a direct influence in terms of like, we want this song to sound like a Neutral Milk Hotel song, but it's like going for that particular guitar tone helps to like keep us grounded, maybe. And there was another song we did, Punk's Dead, which was like a country song for 4 or 5 years. And then we decided that actually it should be like a bit of a Killers ripoff. And so we like changed the key from F to E, and we found the exact synthesizer patch that they'd used on Smile Like You Mean It. And then we just did the song that way. And I think just like fixating on that particular kind of stupid, dumb idea really like freed us up to do a lot of things with that song that we had kind of always been trying to do, but were never really able to do in the kind of accidental box that we'd put ourselves in.
I guess like I think like what Hayden sort of pointed to in a way was that like it's a little bit song by song. Like I think all of us will sometimes be like, oh, okay, I have this idea, and like even if I've certainly felt like this, like even if I'm like let's say for Punk's Dead, that's really not the kind of guitar I would not name the Killers as an influence of mine personally in terms of like literally anything. But in pursuing this like initially pretty crazy thing, I was like, okay, well, I should sort of work out what to do here and then go on a little exploration journey of like guitar tones and different ways of playing and even just like different ways of using my right hand. And so like I think that maybe in some ways this kind of ties back to that thing we were talking about earlier about like different members of the band sort of like, you know, taking the really captaining, shepherding, I don't know, whatever, a song is like, I feel like often that happens with a song where the member of the band is a little bit more at home. So like I felt like that a little bit more with like recording a song that we've been playing live for a long time, All I've Got, because I grew up on a lot of like folk country, Dylan, and like lots of 60s, 70s stuff, and that kind of suited that. But then I think we all really enjoy being like guided into our own personal uncharted waters by another band member who's like, I feel like Hayden sort of like, I think it was Hayden's idea for Punk's Dead to go down that Killers path. And I like love that so much. So I was like, I get to like go and explore this stuff that I wouldn't probably have thought to do myself. But now I have an excuse to figure out how someone did this guitar tone or whatever.
Yeah, I think like that's a really good, like, I don't know that we necessarily have influences as a band, but like the stuff that like that we talk about and that I know you guys listen to, like, is stuff that I think about a lot. So like Hayden, when we first started the band, you showed me Wilco, who I hadn't heard before, and like I love Wilco now, but like that was a really big moment for me and a really cool thing, like, and that I think about a lot with the band. And like, yeah, I hadn't really listened to the Mountain Goats very much before, like hanging out with Jack and listening to them. And then I get like Laura Marling with Kathy is a big one, who again I hadn't listened to very much. And like I know Dan has a very wide range of tastes in music. Like Beefheart is a big one that I associate with Dan for some reason. And like even Swans, like, yeah. Yeah, I guess like if I were to say like the music that influences the way I think about Helena Pop the most, like that isn't those ones that I associate with all of you, which I don't know. Have I unfairly categorized anyone? I don't want to just like list stuff that influences you.
I would like to be associated a little bit more with Gareth Lydiard, but only since I got the Silvertone and it's got a Bixby, so I can go, wow.
That is really cool. It is really good when you do that. But yeah, I think about like, I guess the Elephant Six recording collective, like Neutral Milk Hotel, Olivia Tremor Control, and the music tapes are all like pretty big ones. Like, and because they like use a really wide sound palette and incorporate field recording and like acoustic folk instruments from different places and times, and I think that's really cool, and that's something that we kind of tap into a bit.
No, I think I agree with what's been said. AJJ is probably more important than it seems like they are from the conversation that we've had so far. They're often lovely keyboard sounds, so I think about those a bit. But that's all I have to add.
Another big part of Helena Pop is the kind of the collective or the communal side of the band, and the kind of DIY aspect and independent aspect. And I wonder if you could maybe talk about that. Whoever wants to take it, maybe Jack, you start, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, we had this discussion quite recently. It's been a bit tricky, obviously, with some of our members being in Melbourne. Ben and Hayden, how you going? But over Zoom, and we came to this point that I think that we feel really satisfied the more and more we are involved with the process of making things that are to do with the band. And we highlighted that the less control we feel over a situation that is to do with Helena Pop, the more uncomfortable we feel and the less satisfied we are with the end result. Yeah. It doesn't mean that we necessarily think that we're the best at doing everything. And I think we really recognize when there are people who are really, we need their help on things. But I think when it comes to things that we can do, that is an aspect that we really embrace, that we, it's our music, like in the end, and we can be a bit bossy and take charge of that.
I mean, I don't think I personally consider us to be a DIY group. I think we use we don't use people. That I almost said that we used people. We do not. We pay people appropriately for their services when they work with us, and we work with them in an appropriate way. No, but we've been, ever since we did Punkstead, we've been working with Jonathan Took, who's a really amazing sound engineer and producer who's, helped us enormously in terms of understanding who we are as people and the process that we want to go by, and understanding that it's more important for us to be satisfied and have fun than it is to achieve certain commercial or I don't even know what the term would be, but markers of success that I think a lot of other people in our situation do use. And then before that, we were working with Louis Montgomery, who we had a really similar process with as well, who helped us to understand who we are as a band. And so I think DIY as a concept, I think we really have gotten to this point where we want to be in charge of everything and we want to be in control. But we're part of a wider community, and we draw on that, and we use those connections and those resources all the time.
But on Hayden's point, yeah, I think that a big part of working with other people is that sort of, we try to afford the people that we work with the same respect that we give each other musically. Whether that be both through when we were recording with Jono, we had little sandwich lunches that we went on during the day. I think that both helped us in terms of our mental space. But also, I think it's an important part of working with people is to show them decency and respect. That this doesn't need to be a purely transactional relationship. Even, I do have pretty strong beliefs that you need to pay people properly. Even in DIY circumstances, it's important to do so. But I think we need to we try to move past that really strictly speaking transactional relationship with the people we work with.
I disagree. No, because I'm sorry. I don't mean to be mean to Jono right now, who's obviously not here on this chat. And I'm not being mean to him at all, but he's not part of the band. And we love working with him, and we absolutely try, I feel like our way of working with each other is fully just our priorities are we respecting each other? Are we having fun? And are we feeling creatively fulfilled? And then, I guess in addition to that, which is more a little moat, is are we respecting everyone else in our community as well? So I totally agree with Jack that we are trying to respect everyone that we encounter, and certainly if we're working with them like Jono, that. But I think that we've definitely had lots of conversations about how do we translate or like communicate to other people the way that we are working, because it is really very communal. And I think that it takes quite a few conversations a lot of the time to truly explain that that's how we're trying to work, and that any one of us is going to veto something if we feel like someone hasn't been involved or hasn't had their voice or has been like shut down or something. Another one is others, if we pick that up, we're going to be like, no, we don't want to do that. We want to make space for that person to feel good about saying what they want or whatever.
Yeah, nice. So it is like that UN thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think a big part of and I don't mean to be in any way throwing Ben under the bus. In fact, I think we try to lift Ben up as much as we can, is that we sort of made a very informal rule that that sort of says that, like, when any of us try anything, but especially when Ben tries something weird, we need to let that happen, you know. And that can be sometimes a bit tricky with people who aren't in the band, who perhaps have very set notions of how things should be done, that this comes off a bit strange where Ben might be suggesting that we use spoons or something like that, you know. But this needs to, I think, is a really important way our band works, that, you know, we respect decisions that we make, and boundaries are not important things to keep unless they serve some purpose that's beyond, you know. Yeah.
Whilst my bones disintegrate, 'cause I'm too close. I am too late, and you can fix a broken fucking bridge to cross any cognitive pit, but it's never the same. And you can't reverse it, and that's one fucking huge that's mutually assured cardiac arrest. And don't you dare forget, you said you loved them.
The visual work to me, again, it kind of follows that punky DIY-esque aesthetic, in that, you know, you've got collage works and that kind of thing, or like hand-drawn stuff for the videos. Do you want to just talk about kind of building the visuals around the music?
I remember we had a conversation once. So I think a lot of like our earlier like artwork was like our tour posters, or like just gig posters, which Jack mostly did in just whatever like kind of way that we could. Like we had this one which was all fridge magnets, which was really great. Or there was one that was like I think this was actually for the show that that Jack mentioned at the beginning, but it was like a math test with like a grade on it, which was really great. And I think that kind of that sort of set the groundwork for our visuals. Like we often, or like we try to always have something that's kind of real world about them, like something very like tactile and physical. And that doesn't always mean that we're doing it ourselves. Like with the EP cover, we got Monica Stiles to do it, and that was like incredible, because we had seen some of her work at like the annual grad show, and it was really cool to be able to bring other people in to do that. Yeah, but I think that real world connection thing is like a really strong thing with the artwork.
And for that EP cover, we ended up the way we designed it was each of us brought in objects for it. And I think that relates, back to that thing again, that we really want every aspect of the band to have input from all of us.
Lay down the smoke-scented plastic, sugar-soaked the surface. Puts a plaster in the hole so no one can see through it. And the light of my life, well, she isn't here. And the last hope's flickering out at the back of the bar, and I'm nowhere, and I'm staring into that orange mist.
So we ended up getting help from our friend Gus Bambury, who does a lot of different art and has done art for different bands, but had a project called I Am Poorly Drawn. That's the Instagram handle. And it just something about the illustrations that Gus was doing, the hand-drawn illustrations with texture, really appealed to me. And I think really worked well with the themes around the song, about, the kind of way memories work and the way we remember things and place things together. So in that case, it was a fully hand-drawn animation. So each frame of the animation was hand-drawn, and the loops were then stacked together into the song, which took a lot of effort on Gus's part, and we're all very thankful for that.
Kathy, did you have anything to add about the visuals?
Not particularly. I feel like I'm the least visual member of the band. Like I really don't think about this in my life. I can't draw. So if I can be not involved, I'm happy. No, I mean, I actually really love, I really like that we like to work with local artists, and a lot of the time it's people that we know. And we do usually discuss a lot about before we did that, how this fits the theme of the song. And we don't want to impose something upon someone that's not their style or what they want to do. So we usually try to think a lot about this is their style, and is that what we want for this song? And let them enjoy the process themselves as well, because that's what we would want to do, I guess. But beyond that, I'm oh my God, don't ask me to draw a stick man.
Yeah, so it is about finding kind of the right fit for the song or the EP or something like that.
Yeah, totally. And the right fit, and not forcing, because in a way, I guess working with someone who's doing visual art is kind of similar to producing, as in that we are kind of, like you said before, sort of in I guess asking if they want to be part of something we're already kind of doing, and give their work, obviously we're paying them, but give their creative energy towards that. So you don't want to ask someone to do something who is not actually fundamentally, you want to ask someone who's going to be yeah, I'm keen and my work suits what you guys want, and that's good. So we put a fair bit of thought into that process, I guess.
I can't survive like this. I can't survive like this. I can't survive like this. I can't survive like. Rub the stick in fabric, dip it in oil, and try not to burn your hand. Cause it's really dark between the mountains, but I need to go see the lowlands, and the way things turn out, you'll probably be playing too. And I think I'm okay alone, and I'll lock eyes with you, and I'm staring into that orange.
You probably don't want to talk about new music or anything like that, or when stuff's going to drop, but how do you kind of see the future of the band unfolding?
I think this has, been a question we've had to ask ourselves as things have changed. When we started the band, we were all in Canberra. A lot of us were at uni at the time. And I think that meant that we had, although university is often very stressful at points, that gave us periods of time where we had lots of free time. Not all of us, obviously, but because we have different schedules. But that certainly was the kind of mode of the band, where we were playing lots of live shows. And that was really how the band formed in the beginning. And I think as we've sort of all gotten a bit older and started shifting the way our lives have gone, we've started to move towards looking at recording and looking at really trying to refine these songs that we're working on. opposed to through the gauntlet of, gigs at places like, a dive bar like the Phoenix, like through our own listening and experience. In terms of the future, like I think we could probably certainly say that there are some songs that we've recorded that will come out, hopefully not in the far too distant future. I don't know if I'm really spoiling at things here. I can't probably, give you more details than that. Or maybe I can. I don't know. How's everyone
Big
feeling?
secret.
We can do it on the fly. How's everyone feeling? Should we? Dan looks unimpressed.
Should we?
Shaking.
Ben
Shaking
Harb's
his
saying
head.
no.
So
okay,
clearly-
so clearly,
You're giving
You
too
don't have
much
to, you
away.
don't have to say anything. You don't have to break any exclusives here on the podcast.
we have signed a pretty big deal, a big contract.
Okay.
We
Yeah,
are a big deal already.
Exactly, that was the deal that we signed. We all signed it in blood.
with Piers Ackerman, which was weird.
Yeah, I don't know why he was
He hasn't been
involved.
around for ages. Here we are.
Weird.
So I think I don't mind saying it because I think I've been saying it to lots of people.
Saying what?
We have recorded a collection of songs that we hope to release at some point.
I have this ongoing feeling, and I'm sure it can't last forever, but I have this ongoing feeling that we are constantly just like practicing, and like eventually we'll get to do like the actual Helena Pop thing, and like all of this is just like a bit of a gestation period until we actually get the chance to do the thing. And I think like I'm definitely speaking for myself in that, because we've obviously done, like we've released an EP, which I think we're all really proud of, and we've released lots of music, and we've played all around the country, and we've kind of like achieved so many of the things that we had kind of always dreamed of doing. But I still just get this feeling that like we are yet to actually put any of our feet forward as a band, and like, you know, pretty soon we will hopefully get to do that. But I'll probably still have that same feeling, and then in 10 years time when we release our, you know, double album of country music that's also like a bit Dory and Electra, I'll still be like, yeah, well, the next one, that's going to be it. Like, that's the real authentic Helena Pop record.
I think like it's obviously true that we've done a bit of a recording bend. There's been a turn towards recording, but I don't even think that that's necessarily much of a bend. It's not like maybe it's a bend in the road that we're following in the Helena Pop car, but there's nothing about the driver of the Helena Pop car that's thought we better, except for the fact that I don't want to veer into a tree. There's nothing we like particularly about the bend in the road.
And I think like we all really love playing live shows. Like that's not an understatement, you know, and without being too topical to date everything, like, yeah, this year's been really tricky with the coronavirus and everything that has meant that, like, I know at the beginning of the year we had like a few shows that were cancelled, and obviously like they haven't happened since, really. Like they've only started picking up again live shows. And I certainly wouldn't say we're saying goodbye to live shows.
Staring into that orange mist, and I can't survive like this. I can't survive like this.
The last thing I like to do is ask everyone what they're listening to at the moment. So I guess we can once again go around the Zoom room. We might start with Kathy because you're at the bottom of my screen. And go from there.
I've been listening to this album from 1970, I forget. And I'm going to pronounce this wrong because it's Brazilian. I don't know if it's Club de Esquina or Esquina, I think, or something like this. And it's by these two guys, Milton Nascimento, and I've actually forgotten the other guy's name as well, but he's just a producer anyway, so, you know. And I'm just absolutely obsessed with it. It's like this epic double album that's like kind of like a bit like Abbey Road-esque, I guess. There's all these like really like full-on strings and like real tiny songs that go for like 20 seconds in little bits. And then the whole thing goes for like an hour and a half. Anyway, maybe I'll learn to pronounce it and spell it and I'll send it to you. That's what I've been listening to on repeat for like the last week.
Fabulous. Hayden, how about you?
Yeah, look, I've mostly been listening to this podcast called EXP Share, which is a Pokemon podcast where two friends play all of the Pokemon games in sequential order and name all their Pokemon ridiculous things. But I just looked back through my Spotify and the last other things I'd listened to were Azim Zane's album, and then before that it was Black Skinhead by Kanye West and Time Is Running Out by Muse, and that's because me and Ben were recording a demo 2 days ago and they were the most important references for that particular song.
Nice. Ben, how about you?
Cry Club, new album, just came out. It's good. New One O Tricks Point Never, Ariana Grande, and BTS.
Very good. Dan, how about you?
I've been listening to Richard Dawson again, which sounds like a confession. It sounds like, but it's been a couple of months, and now I'm back again. With thanks to Carrie Longman for that wonderful introduction. We're listening to a lot of Richard Dawson.
That did sound like a confession. It sounded like you were guilty of something. How about you, Jack?
I've been listening to Purple Mountains, the album. Yeah, I find that one's pretty hard to listen to, I think, with everything that happened after. But I don't know, there's just some really good songs on that album that really strike me. Yeah. Nice.
Does anyone have any concluding remarks that they need to get off their chest?
One thing that I wanted to bring up, but I never had the moment to bring it up in, was just that I think one of the most important members of Helena Pop is Jack's van. So Jack has this really big car, like it's a van, and I think part of the reason that I struggle to remember so many important events in the lifetime of the band is because all of them just kind of go back to us all sitting in this van on the Hume Highway going somewhere. And that's been the same from 2014 until now. And I think like as a character, it's like introduced me to all of this like amazing new music that I'd never heard before. And it's like guided us on all kinds of like physical and emotional journeys. And I know that sounds like a certain thing, but it's completely true. And it's exactly how I feel. And I think that if we didn't have access to that van, then I think we would all probably be very different people, but we also would just not have had so many of the experiences that we've had.
Prejudice and fucking bullshit. You're not making it any better. You're not making our lives any easier. Pumping out your constant bigotry. You couldn't mean a single fucking thing to me. If this is what punk rock is, punk rock kids insulting other kids, and I hate myself. Wicked words aren't the weapons of weekend warriors. They're the tools of the oppressors. And why is it always women's voices and minorities being trodden on first and stepped into the fucking dirt? And I know I'm part of the privileged few, and I'm sorry to each and every one of you for getting your way, taking up your time with my shitty words and meaningless rhymes. If this is what punk rock is, punk rock kids insulting other kids, and I hate myself. think you're worth the energy. There's hundreds of your brethren waiting in the wings, and it's not our right to stop you saying these god-awful things. Living in the age of online anonymity, targeted advertising, neo-liberal anarchy. We like people, isn't that enough? I guess we don't fit in your very narrow description of what it means to be a punk. If this is what punk rock is, punk rock kids insulting other kids that I hate myself, and I sure as hell hate everybody else as well. Being offensive doesn't make you anything but an asshole. Yes, you're an asshole, and everyone knows it.
The track you just heard was the single Punk's Dead by Helena Pop. Ben Hub, what about that very fun interview made your brain big?
Everything. I think when you are having fun, your brain gets bigger faster.
It was a very fun interview, was it?
Yeah, it was. It really was. It was probably one of the funniest, funnest that I've done so far. And the first one that we've done with the whole band as well.
Yeah,
like
not-
all 5 members, not missing a member.
Yeah, not 3/4 or 3/4 rather.
Yeah. Or 4/5 or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. Whole numbers, no fractions.
And it made it pretty hilarious, honestly, because they're all very funny people.
Yeah.
And they all love and respect each other very much, I think. To the point where they wouldn't dare take the question themselves.
Had to do it with prompting.
Yeah, there's a lot of moments when, and I think it may not have made it into the episode, but Hayden said that they all, we all like each other too much that we wouldn't dare to like speak on someone's behalf. So we just wait until someone else says something. I think it's really great. And I think Helena Pop are probably one of my favorite bands, just kind of in general at the moment. They just do work that is, it's just so amazing. I think one of the really interesting things about their music is kind of what Jack mentioned about not trying to bottle the lightning of the live show, because their live show is something very special and specific. They put a lot of effort into dressing up,
The pajamas.
yeah, exactly, or to like go even further, and make it, pardon me, an entire experience for that 40 minutes or however long the show is. And I really respect that. But then going from there and saying and making the conscious decision to be like, oh no, we're not just going to try and recreate the music that we're making and playing live. We're going to make studio music, take the time and effort to arrange the songs that Jack's giving us in a way that kind of best suits the themes, the ideas, and the musicality of the piece. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, you sort of touched on it there. I agree with everything you said, but the one thing in there that really, stuck out to me was when they were talking about the writing and the arranging process. I think it was Hayden. He said something like really great in there. Talking about them playing different instruments and stuff. He said the freedom to not play or to play something not anticipated or that would not be expected. I think that's like, well, for me anyway, it's such a different approach to how I think a lot of people think about writing or arranging music.
Yeah. I agree.
When they were talking about, what if Jack didn't play guitar here?
Yeah. And that, to remove and to, definitely. And I think Kathy brought it up as well. Trying to not make the instrument like an extension of yourself.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
And to like make it, there has to be a reason for it to be there, kind of thing. Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Totally. It's just a different approach. I think it's a great way of thinking about it. Yeah, just I don't know, it's a way I wouldn't have considered writing, if I had to approach something like that. So yeah.
No, I agree. It's just the breadth of the music they make as well. Like it's gone. It's so far from where they began. And I guess that kind of goes down to the kind of instrumentation and how they've progressed and grown as people and the music has come with that. But to go from the kind of humble beginnings of the punk folk singer-songwriter acoustic guitar with a small band to these kind of really lush pop arrangements.
Yeah.
Like alt pop arrangements. It's just incredible.
Totally. It's like a great thing to see that, but also I think having like their own sound, to really have carved out something like that, it's kind of special.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And a really clear idea of how that sound's going to get bigger and bigger and progress more, I think. Incredible stuff. You have any final thoughts?
No, that was it.
That was great. I want to thank Jack, Ben, Hayden, Kathy, and Dan for being on the podcast. All of Helena Pop, they're a fantastic band. And I want to thank you, the listener, for listening. It's been a fun set of 16 episodes thus far?
I think so, something like that.
Yeah. And thank you for listening. We will continue to make these podcasts. And you know the drill. Subscribe, hit follow, tell your friends, write a review, all that good stuff. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Cassette Connection is recorded and produced by Ben Harb and Alex Ferrugia. For more information, head to our website, cassetteconnection.com.
You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Cassette Connection. And if you would like to be featured or just want to get in touch, our email is contact@cassetteconnection.com.